Encounter Grace, where we come face to face with God's work in the world for our good. Join host Jason McKnight as we explore practical issues of community, theology, and leadership in everyday life.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Encounter Grace. My name is Ben Hendricks, and I, as always, am here with Jason McKnight. But here at the start of 2022, we want to kick off the year right and kick it off well, but also encourage everyone to do an audit of our lives, to take stock and make course corrections. And really, it's just a wise thing to do once in a while, to kind of look at your life and see the good and maybe some of the bad that's seeped in as well, and have a kind of a sober exploration beats a rash New Year's resolution.
I hate New Year's resolutions.
I always love the idea. It's the outworking and the fulfillment of that.
Yeah, and it's the failure on day 6.
Yeah, always, right? And so maybe we have not really thought about this, but as we've kind of processed, we found that there are 4 books that determine the course of your life. 4 books that guide us or gut us. 4 books that make all the difference in how our lives unfold. Our checkbook, our date book, our phone book, and the good book. And of course, all of these books are just shorthand, right? I don't even know what a phone book is. But a checkbook is how we handle our money. The date book, how we schedule our lives. A phone book, our relationships. And then, of course, the good book. How we think about God's purposes for us. So over the next few weeks, we're going to kind of go back and forth between talking about these 4 different books, and then even have another intro, another person in as well. And the hope is that we can live with more confidence.
Yeah.
And so today, I want to talk to you, Jason, about what it means to have a date book. That this does not mean the book of all the girls we've dated, right? And I'm sure yours is mighty long.
No, not so long.
All those Canadian women. It means our calendar, our app on the phone that keeps us straight, the dates that run us, the habits that we start forming, the places we have to be to keep our lives going, right? All the ways that we fill the great amount of time the Lord has given us. So Jason, how can getting our schedules right lead us to more joy in life?
And that's really the question, is how looking at each of these books, how can it get us to the joy that God has for us, for the flourishing God has for us? So right on, 100%. And really, I think when we think about our date book, when we think about our calendar, when we think about our schedules, I think the question can be distilled all the way down to something as simple as this. Do you run your schedule, or does your schedule run you? This past fall, I had 2 of the busiest months that I've ever had in 18 years in Kinston. I mean, there were things going on in my extended family. There were things going on at Grace. We were, you, Ben, were out having a baby, so we were doing a little bit more on the podcast. And there was a mayoral election, and we had all the mayor candidates in here. Stuff was going on with South America Mission. On top of all that, we had college applications for one of our boys who's hoping to maybe go to college. And then, which, he wanted to apply to a bunch of colleges, not realizing there's essays for each one. And then 6 weeks in a row of travel. And on top of all that, we had a little renovation project going on at our home. It was the busiest 2 months or 2.5 months that I've ever had in Kinston. And there was no rest. There was just no rest. It was hairy. The schedule ran me for that season. There was no getting away from it. But it reminded me that many people face that kind of an existence every day through no fault of their own. Like stuff has just happened to them. But it also reminded me that some people allow that kind of existence. They could have a different one, but the schedule runs them, and they just feel frantic, and they feel all the way like the water's up to their chin and they can't get a breath. So how does God's life of flourishing, is it able to be manifested in our schedules? Does God want us in the rat race? I mean, how do we combine taking advantage of these opportunities we have in our area, being productive with our lives at work, because that's part of God's plan, giving our best to our family, and giving our excellence to our work calling, and combine rest and renewing without guilt and without exhaustion. Like all those things, from opportunities to productivity to excellence and giving our best to our families and relationship and resting, all of that is what's made up in the schedule. And so let's do an audit of our schedule, an audit of our date book. Not the little black book, as Ben has already said. I wrote that joke for him and he stumbled over it. It was great. You didn't know it was coming. So I think the first thing, yeah, I know. I think the first thing, let me just frame it with two passages from Scripture. Super simple, very famous. I mean, we don't do anything new here. We just remind us of the good thing that's already out there. So in Psalm 90, the only psalm written by Moses, who made it to 120, so he knows a little bit about schedules. He says, teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. So Psalm 90, teach us to number our days aright. In other words, teach us to live properly on the days we have so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to think carefully about our days, to give consideration to them so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Wouldn't you love to live with wisdom? Well, that's Psalm 90. And then 1 Corinthians 10:31, another verse that is just one of my favorites, and you'll see why in a second. Whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, that's why it's my favorite, do it all for God's glory.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you do, whether you plan your schedule, do it all for God's glory. So right at the front end here, I just think as we launch into this idea of how do we live in routines and schedules and rhythms, a heart of wisdom and the glory of God. Like that's what we're about. Let's live wisely, but we want to live so that God is glorified.
Yeah, I love that. Just because one of the more helpful things that the Lord has taught me, specifically like in the last couple of years, as I've become more and more scheduled, as I've had more things to take care of and make sure you can keep moving them up and all that stuff, it is just the value of a day. Like that, God's given us a certain amount of days, and we don't know that number, but to look at each one as valuable. Not every day is everything, and we need that help, but every day is something. And so we don't have to see that every day. We have to change the world and drastically change something, but that it is a valuable day. It's worth something. I love that.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, so when we get down to doing it, the first principle, and it's very famous and it's very old, and you know it as soon as I'm going to say it. People, maybe it's this: put the boulders in first. And I don't even remember who first said it or first illustrated it, but it's kind of the story is told of this high school science class or physics class, and the teacher brings out a 2-gallon bucket, puts it on the desk, it's empty, and with a lid, and then there's a pile of different sized rocks on the table. There's like sand, a pile of sand, and then some pebbles and gravel and small stones and softball sized rocks and a big soccer ball. And the science teacher just says, look, all of this fits in that 2-gallon bucket. Make it so and put the lid on. And the kids just throw it all in randomly. And of course, the rocks don't fit when you throw it all willy-nilly. Especially if you start with the sand, put the gravel in. You just can't get everything in to get the lid shut. But the trick is, and this is what everybody knows, whoever first did it, now you can watch it on YouTube, but the trick is, if you put that soccer ball-sized rock in first, and then those softball-sized rocks in, and then work your way down, it all fits because the smaller stones fit in and fill in the space around the larger ones. And the sand, it just kind of gets in all the nooks and crannies, and the lid snaps shut. You put the boulder in first. That's true for our schedules. As we do life, if we want to do it with a heart of wisdom and to the glory of God, you put the boulders in first. What are the biggest things in your estimation or in your life? Figure out those, and everything else is going to take care of itself. Now, I think the first thing people often think is work, because you don't work, you don't live.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, right. I actually think there's a bigger boulder than work as for believers. And for me, as a follower of Jesus, not because of what I do for a living, but as a disciple of the Lord Jesus, for me, I order my daily and weekly schedule around the Lord. And church is non-negotiable. Being with God's people in God's house on the Lord's day for the praise of God is absolutely non-negotiable. That's the soccer ball in my regular schedule.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's days you're not there, like, because that happens and we travel and stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
I get it. But it's not like when hunting season's in, I don't go to church, or when, different things. Church, like the people of God in God's presence, that's the non-negotiable in my followership of Jesus, because he invites us to that. Don't give up the habit of meeting together. Second thing right with that is my house church family. House church isn't an event you sign up for. It's a family you're bonded to.
Yeah.
And so that, of course, takes time. Two more boulders. Like, now I got a lot of boulders, but you know me. I'm an optimist.
Sure, yeah.
I'm going to
It's a
have
big bucket.
But two more is family dinners and daily quiet times. And that's for me. Now, again, I'm not talking as a professional Christian, a vocational pastor.
Sure.
I'm talking as a believer. I'm talking as someone who just wants to please Jesus, even if, no matter what I do in life. Family dinners. Again, we don't get to do family dinners every night, but we do our best to organize ourselves around the table at the dinner hour in some way. And even now, Andrew's basketball practice means he doesn't get home some nights till almost 8 o'clock. Well, we don't quite wait that late to eat, because some of us get a little hangry. But you know what we do? We do dessert with him. He's eating his warmed up plate, and the three of us come, we sit around the table, and for 15 minutes even, we're just kind of there as a family. Table time, FaceTime, it's a boulder in our family. It just means something to us. And then the last one for me personally is, as a follower of Jesus, daily quiet time. Like, without this, I have no fuel for the day. I don't have an electric car, but like, imagine you're plugging your Tesla in and you can run X number of miles, and then you got to plug it in, and it takes half hour to recharge the battery.
Yeah.
I think I can run 36 hours without fresh grace from the Lord. But then, like the Tesla, you got to plug me in. I start getting short with people, and that's why, honestly, vacations are a little weird, because the routine at home of being with the Lord each day, everything goes out the window on vacation, and it's fun. Mm-hmm. But, I get a little shorter after 5 days.
It's true.
That's for more than just that. But, so those are the four boulders I start with. Weekly with God's people, the house church family God's bonded me to, table time with our family, and plugging into God's grace alone each day.
I love that, like, these most important things don't always take the most amount of time either. Like, a lot of these are not things that, like, you haven't even mentioned work yet, I don't believe.
Right.
And that's probably the thing that's going to take the most amount of time. But those family dinners, 15 minutes. Or your quiet time, maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes. And for some of us, it might be 5. But the one thing I tell our students all the time, 5 minutes a day, 5 times a week will change your life.
That's right.
Those boulders, man, the weight that they carry, it affects a lot.
That's a really good point. Because I think, next is like the next size boulder after the big one, which for me is 4, really is work. Like, God's called us to do something with our lives. And for those of us who work outside the home, he's called us to give our best to that. To give our best in relationships with people, but to give our excellence to the things he's called us to. The Lord does not want Christians being bad employees. Or bad bosses or bad owners. Like, he wants us to do our best there. So that's a boulder, and I just got to account for that. And for those of us called to work inside the home, he has for us to be stay-at-home dads, stay-at-home moms who give their best to their family and the gracious administration of the household economy. Like, economy is the word that means household in Greek. So this is like the most important thing people can do if you're a stay-at-home dad or a stay-at-home mom, is to run your home well.
Yeah.
It's not just, anyway, the exercise, sleep, rest, these 3 things, that's the next size boulder.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the sleep part a little later. And the next size boulder is the fun, because there are a whole bunch of different things. Like, there might be a Duke game or a Montreal hockey game 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week. Those are kind of fun.
They are.
I don't get to see all of them. Why? Because it's not the biggest boulder. It's now we're getting down to the gravel and the sand.
Yeah.
And the little project, when I was making the desk that I love in my office, well, it took me weeks and weeks and weeks on a Saturday afternoon at the workshop. But some Saturdays I skipped because it's gravel.
Yeah.
because I had to do anyway, blah, blah, blah. And, the Sunday afternoon nap, everyone loves it. I don't get one every week, but you try. And then the smallest bit there, now you're down to the time wasters that are just there, the multitasking, social media kind of stuff. And they're just fun. It's candy, man. It's candy. But when all you eat is candy, if I'm changing metaphors, it's just a disaster. It's a disaster. Now, look, this is me. It's not you. Everybody's got to make their own boulders and figure it out. But the point is, have you done an audit?
Yeah. And it's funny how quickly some of those sand things, or those really small gravel things, really do just kind of find their way in. Because the boulders you have to pick up and just place in there. You can almost accidentally drop the sand in the bucket, and it just fills your schedule, and whether you mean to or not. And then all of a sudden, you just ended up with a whole bucket of sand.
Oh man, if you want the fear of the Lord in you, just look on your screen time.
Oh gosh,
I'm
telling you,
man.
It's convicting for sure.
Yeah,
because it's a lot of sand.
Yeah,
and I'd never think it's that much, but man.
It's just interesting. It is interesting. I don't think it's that much. I was shocked. I looked back, yesterday preparing for this over the last 3 weeks, and I dropped my jaw. I was like, seriously? That much time on my screen? I had no idea. And I'm trying. Like, imagine if I wasn't trying, which you can. Just look at me at different times. Here's the other fun thing about getting the boulders in first, the really important things that you're not going to fudge on. It allows you to evaluate requests on your time. Because everything, whether it's an opportunity or whether it's a specific ask, and it allows you, as Stephen Covey said, to say no because you have a bigger yes inside.
Yep.
When you know what you're really wanting to do, then as something comes across your radar screen, you can say, whoops, that doesn't fit in. Like, for instance, in my sense, table time is a big deal for our family. Especially, this is Andrew's senior year. He's going off next year. I practically cry no, I don't really. But, if we're not fighting, if we're laughing, because the fights happen too, but, the kids get to see that. If someone said to me, hey, Jace, I want you to join this club, in this community club, and it meets 6 to 8 Tuesdays and Thursday nights, no, I'm not doing it right now. I might do it in 5 years. I'm not doing it right now because this is table time. But I don't want to disappoint that person in my personality. But now I know I got a bigger yes inside. So I can say, actually, I can't make that work, but thanks for the invite. Call me again.
Yeah.
In 5 years.
And what's funny is, I've had to walk through that pretty recently, just with the birth of Harper, of having to look at my time. I mean, I really did this. I'd kind of already thought about it a good bit, but right before she was born, I looked at my schedule and was like, I spend a lot of time doing, A, B, or C. And I need to just prepare my heart to get rid of A, B, and C if I have to. And am I willing to do that? And so I had to kind of make a list of, here are the things that are the non-negotiables. So it was legitimately follower of Christ. So that means, being in God's word, being at church, not because I'm on staff, but because I want to commune with God's people. Well, that next is husband. Okay. Next is dad. And then there's work. And what does that look like? And then I get to be the, whatever else it is, whether it's a sport, whether it's, a hobby or whatever. Then you add in all those things, those big boulders first, and you get to just look at all these things that used to just creep in. Well, now you fend them off for the safety of the boulder or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I find that so helpful.
Yeah. Another thing, as you're doing an audit of your schedule, number our days are right. Sleep. When's the last time? Yeah, this is really fun. When's the last time you thought about how much sleep you should be getting, how much sleep you are getting, how much sleep God wants you to get?
Yeah.
Thanks be to God, sleep is a gift from Him. He's wired us to rest. And it seems to be that between 6 to 8 hours a night is what He gives to most people to sleep. There's some people who need more sleep than that, and some people that can thrive on less sleep than that. But the most of us seems to be 6 to 8 is the key. Well, now all you have to do is take a couple of steps, sit down for 10 minutes and figure this out, or while you're driving down the street. If I've got to get up and out the door at 8 o'clock to get to work, my calling, and if I've got to also help my family get out the door, and also get ready to get to work, and also, make some breakfast or lunch or whatever, and also kind of plug the Tesla in the morning so get fresh grace from the Lord. Well, when do I need to wake up? And maybe it's, okay, I back all that up, and now it's 6:15.
Yeah.
To get out at 8 so that I can, so 6:15. So then when do I need to go to bed to get 6:15 in a way? Like, this is really elementary.
Yeah.
But, if God says, hey, I love you, I want you rested 6 hours, 7 hours, 7.5 hours a night, 8 hours, here's what that means. So then somehow 10:30 at night, you're sort of in that vein. To me, again, I feel like people, whenever I have stayed up late and and been tired in a season of staying up late, it's not by intention, it's by accident.
Yeah.
It's like what you were saying, drifting. Yep. And like, I just watched one more show on Netflix, because it was so good at cliffhanger, and then it's another 45 minutes or whatever. And you didn't mean to, but now all of a sudden it's 12:45.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what if we organized that a little better? Again, the idea of an audit and stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, again, kind of right in the same lane as this. About 4 years ago, I was struggling with this a good bit. I'd gotten out of a sleep routine and all that. It was right when we moved here, and because in seminary I just didn't have one. I worked, I was with Janessa, or I was studying and doing work and all that stuff. So I just didn't have one. But I heard a podcast, and I got the book. A guy named Matthew Walker. Mm-hmm. It's the book. Is called Why We Sleep. And it was actually and I don't say this lightly, one of the more influential books that I've actually read in the last probably 5 years or so, because it was just so helpful of helping me see there's such an importance on sleep. I mean, all the way from just health concerns, all the way to the way your brain functions, the way the rest of your body functions. One of the things I remember from it, and this, to preface this, he comes from an evolutionary bent, and his big thing.
Presbyterian.
Yeah,
no.
He would go on to say in the book and on the podcast that Mother Nature's greatest attempt at immortality is rest. And so, what's interesting about that, and what I think we can take as believers, is it's such a crucial thing to the replenishment and health of just our bodies and our minds, and I'm willing to bet our souls and our strengths as well. That it's just this whole piece that we need to make a priority for. It's not some little side thing where, you kind of had in college, where if you get 4 or 5, that's good enough. We might want to commit some time to it.
Yeah. I love that. I really love that. And also commit time to knowing what it's going to take in the morning. So planning for that in the evening. And then one step earlier, not just your bedtime, but what does it take to calm down so you can sleep? And I'm sure he said this in the book, and there's several others. Stress and Adrenaline is another great book. I forget who wrote that, but the idea that adrenaline courses through our body, and we need to sort of dial it down as we approach sleep. So the last thing you need to be doing, honestly, is reading all sorts of stuff that, political stuff that makes your blood boil.
It's true.
You don't need that at 11 o'clock at night. You just start thinking, or the scrolling and stuff where either you're like, oh man, they have such a better life than me, or wow, I want to do that, or whatever, or even just the blue light on your screen. It's good to take a step back from that for a few minutes before bed, and a few minutes means whatever you need it to mean. But the point is, how do you get there properly? That's all. The point is not, hey, here's a legalistic way to do it that everyone has to. The point is, we're all going to get there if you think about it. Teach us to number our days aright, so we gain a heart of wisdom.
Amen.
Yeah. So sleep is crucial, but I think, again, it's another gift of God's grace. If you were making up a God, you wouldn't make up a God who said, hey, friends, sleep a third of your life and take 1 day a week off. No other God does that. Every other God is slave driver. Our God is about, hey, let me give you a life that flourishes and sleep a third of your life. Maybe not quite a third if you're, I can't sleep 8 hours. About 7 though.
Yeah, I'm not getting 8 hours right now. Thanks, Harper.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I mean, one last thing here, just for fun, and it's kind of like a catch-all because, you got to stop somewhere. But, and we've hit it, intentionality on the one hand, temperament on the other, and that'll bring you the right rhythms for you. Like everybody is a little different.
Yeah.
And we are pretty, like I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know how driven I am. Like, and by driven, I think that means like this overarching desire to succeed and be number one in everything you do. I don't find I have that, but I'm very disciplined. And both of those things can accomplish very similar things. You get a lot done if you're driven or if you're disciplined.
Yep.
And I feel like, man, I get to see a fair amount of fruit from the energy that I put in, the labor I put into things.
Yeah.
But it to me, it's from a discipline. Well, that's my temperament. So for me, we as a family, when we had Harper-aged kids, we got right on the schedule, which people talk about baby-wise or growing kids God's way. This idea of bring the baby into your schedule so that they learn how to live on your schedule, and so you're organizing things. It made perfect sense to us, and it really freed us up. Who we put those kids down to 7:30 at night, and we had a whole evening ahead of us, and it was great. We got a date every night, but that's our temperament.
Yeah.
And other kids in families without schedules, well, you look at them now, they're our boys' age. They're great kids. It didn't hurt them. Back then we're like, oh no, they're going to be destroyed. No, it's not. It's just, so temperament, intentionality though. You can slide into all sorts of silly things, but just be intentional before the Lord, and He'll lead you in the way you need, the rhythm that works for your own person, for your own temperament.
It's so helpful. I just love this. Of just taking an audit of just our time and our Datebook of how we're scheduling things and how we're making things and how, what are the things that are the big boulders in our lives. And I think we all just need to hear this podcast and just go, okay, what are the actual things in my life that are those heavy boulders, and what's the next thing, and then what's the next thing, and what's the next thing, and actually taking an audit of our time.
Because then you're running your schedule, it's not running you. And it's for the glory of God.
Yep, and it's only going to benefit you and then everyone else around you too.
Yep.
Exactly, flourishing. Well, Jason, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for listening to this podcast, and make sure you can like it, share it, send it to a friend, all of that. And we'll see you next time. See ya.
This is a ministry of Grace Fellowship Church in Kinston, North Carolina. Visit gracekinston.org or follow us on Facebook and Instagram.